Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ayawam tawab la atam za ach yakam yawam. Manor chagador Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya hamalakat hashamayim kwa repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call layim la la abanawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rucha hakodash. Wamashana laza kwaniam na wamala akyam shawar chagador, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists bahasham. In the name Yahweh Shai delivers in double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Zayashaya, this is Isaiah chapter 44, and we'll start at verse 9. And the subtitle says, The Folly of Idolatry. All right, and ultimately what folly is, it goes into foolishness. All right, this is the definition of folly. It says, lack of good sense, foolishness. It says a costly ornamental building with no practical purpose. And that's essentially what these idols serve as. All right. Which, a lot of things that are in today's society are essentially based off of the tenets and the ideologies of, these idols. All right. And ultimately, following those, all right, is someone that shows a lack of good sense. It says foolishness, a foolish act, idea, or practice. It says salat. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty much it. Because it goes into foolishness. All right, but nevertheless, continuing on, this is Isaiah, Yeshaya chapter 44 and verse 9. It says, they that make a graven image are all of them vanity. All right, let's get this word for vanity. All right, and it reads, it says, tahawa. It says tahawa, and it says, formlessness, confusion, unreality. All right, so unreality, you see, because they aren't living. All right, it says that which is empty or unreal. All right, it says a place of chaos, confusion, a worthless thing. All right, so let's get this in the NLT, and it says, how foolish are those who manufacture idols. These prized objects are really worthless. The people who worship idols don't know this, so they are put to shame. All right, so let's go back and read it in KJV. It says, they that make graven image are all of them vanity. All right, and ultimately, the things that they are making are vanity, you see, but then also the people that made it, they're vain as well. It says, and their delectable things shall not profit. They don't have any type of avail. They don't have any type of benefit. It says, and they are their own witnesses. They see not nor know that they may be ashamed. They're going to be ashamed ultimately, those that make it and those that follow after the graven images. So it says, who hath formed a power or molten a graven image that is profitable for nothing? Behold, and let's read this in the NLT. It says, who but a fool would make his own God, an idol that cannot help him one bit? All right, because that's the answer to that. It says, who hath formed a power or a molten image that is profitable for nothing? Only a fool is a person that would make a idol. It's not profitable for anything. It's not going to tell you what to do in these times, just like it did the different idols. Didn't say anything during the times of the 19. So it says, behold, all his fellows shall be ashamed, and the workmen, they are of men. Let them all be gathered together. Let them stand up. Yet they shall fear, and they shall be ashamed together. All right. And again, those that are communing with these idols, all right, those that make them, they are ultimately going to be ashamed. Let's get this word for ashamed. And it says, bawash, to put to shame, to be disappointed. They're going to be disappointed. All right, when their powers don't deliver them. All right, they're going to feel ashamed. All right, they're going to, let me see. They're going to, be pale in the face, because ultimately, in the times of the said calamities, all right, ultimately they're going to be in a state of being afraid. That's when people get a pale face, when they're afraid, So it says confounded, become dry. It says confusion. Ultimately those that again abide in idols are going to be in a state of being confounded, in which when you go into like a confoundation, that ultimately goes into a state of confusion, you see, because these idols don't lead forth to any type of direction or purpose. All right, they just look good, pursuant to let's get this real fast. This is Habakkuk chapter 2, and we'll get the last verse, or verse 18. It says, what profiteth the graven image, that the maker thereof hath graven it? The molten image and the teacher of lies, the maker of his work trusted therein to make dumb idols. All right, what is the purpose of making an idol? No, they don't teach anything. All right, they're ultimately a teacher of lies. All right, something that makes their followers feel good. All right, and it says the maker of his work trusted therein to make dumb idols. They don't even tell you. They don't speak to you. All right, in the times of calamity. All right, so they're useless. Verse 19, it says, woe unto him that saith to the wood, all right, which represents Christianity, awake to the dumb stone, all right, you got the copper stone for Islam. Arise, it shall teach, behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there's no breath at all in the midst of it, all right, because ultimately these things, they just look good, all right, they're laid over with gold and silver, so it's just something that, catches the eye, So going back to Isaiah, Yeshaya chapter 44, and verse 12, it says, the smith with tongs both worketh in the coals, and fashioneth it with hammers, and worketh it with the strength of his arms. Yet he is hungry, and his strength faileth. He drinketh no water, and is faint. The carpenter stretcheth out his rule. He maketh it out with a line. He fitteth it with planes. He marketh it out with the compass, and maketh it after the the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, that it may remain in the house. This pretty much is going into the process of them ultimately coming up with these different idols. He heweth him down cedars, and taketh the cypress and the oak, which he strengtheneth for himself among the trees of the forest. He planteth an ash, and the rain doeth nourish it. Then shall it be for a man to burn, for he will take thereof and warm himself. Yet he kindleth it and baketh bread. Yet he maketh a god and worshipeth it. He maketh it a graven image, and falleth down thereto. He burneth part thereof in the fire, and with part thereof he eateth flesh. He roasteth roast, and is satisfied. Yet he warmeth himself, and saith, Aha, I am warm, I have seen the fire. And the residue thereof he maketh a god, even his graven image. He falleth down unto it, and and worship it, and prayeth unto it, and saith, Deliver me, for thou art my power. All right. And let's get this. Well, I'll continue on. It says, they have not known nor understood, for he has shut their eyes, that they cannot see, in their hearts, that they cannot understand. And none considereth in his heart, neither is there knowledge nor understanding to say, I have burned part of it in the fire. Yeah, also I have baked bread upon the coals thereof. I have roasted flesh and eaten it. And shall I make the residue thereof an abomination, shall I fall down to the stock of a tree? And nobody ultimately considers this. Nobody ultimately considers, if they're a follower of Buddhism, they're ultimately bowing down and worshiping, some fat nigga, that somebody made, into a figurine. Nobody considers this, Verse 20, it says, he feedeth on the ashes, a deceived heart hath turned him aside, that he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Nobody ultimately takes a second and sits there and ultimately considers what it is that they're doing. You see, because if they were using good sense, which that really goes back to the scriptures, good sense goes back to the scriptures, common sense goes back to the scriptures. Nobody ultimately has the common sense, all right, to ultimately consider, what it is that they're involving themselves in, and 2/3, they could care less. The heathen could care less. They weren't ultimately made, to follow the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. You see, but ultimately, Jake involves themselves in different forms of idolatry. All right, and they don't ultimately have, the two pennies to rub together, which it really goes back to, the Lord chose to, blind their eyes. You see, but I'm gonna read this again, and it says, verse 19, it says, and none considereth in his heart, neither is there knowledge nor understanding to say, I have burned part of it in the fire. Yet also I have baked bread upon the coals thereof. I have roasted flesh and eaten it, and shall I make the residue thereof an abomination? It's ultimately an abomination, because the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, is to be worshipped. It says, shall I fall down to the stock of a tree? Ultimately, individuals fall down to a stock of a tree. That's a creation. They're ultimately falling down to a creation, you see. Verse 20 says, he feedeth on ashes, a deceived heart hath turned him aside, that he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Because it says a lie in the right hand, you see, because ultimately, the right hand is what you rely on, so you have individuals that are relying on a lie. When we talk about, religions like, so-called Christianity, all right, Islam, Buddhism, and whatever else, it's a lot of individuals that ultimately, follow after these ideologies, and they are heaping destruction unto themselves. All right, so let's get a few more. Zayashaya, this is Isaiah chapter 41, and we'll get verse 21. Salat. Yeah, verse 21, it says, "Produce your cause, saith the Lord. Bring forth your strong reason, saith the King of Jacob. Let them bring them forth, and shew us what shall happen. Let them shew the former things what they be, that we may consider them, and know the latter end of them, or declare us the things for to come." All right. And ultimately, none of these idols, all right, have the power to, they don't go into prophecy. All right. Or excuse me, the different ideologies, they don't push forth any type of prophecy. All right. And they're not going to speak on, anything that, happened in the past. All right. And if they do if they do talk about something that happened in the past, they got it from the scriptures. All right. So it says that we may consider and know the latter end of them, or declare us the things for to come. All right, I'm going to read verse 22 again. It says, "Let them bring them forth, and shew us what shall happen. Let them shew the former things what they be, that we may consider them, and know the latter end of them, or declare us things for to come. Shew the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods." All right, and ultimately, show show what's going to happen. Declare prophecy. All right, because again, if any books talk about anything that's going to happen, all right, they got it from the scriptures. So it says that we may know that ye are gods, yeah, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and behold it together. So ultimately, none of these idols have the power to bring any events upon the planet Earth. All right, everything that happens, whether it's good or whether it's evil, all right, it comes from the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. All right, and I'm gonna actually get that point. Let's get Isaiah Yashaya chapter 45, and we'll get verse 7. It says, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, do all these things." So if anything that happens on this planet Earth, all right, ultimately goes back. It's the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. So let's read this. All right, continuing on, Isaiah 41 and verse 23, finishing out. It says, "Behold, ye are of nothing, and your work of naught. An abomination is he that chooseth you." All right, so ultimately, those that choose these different idols, they're abominations. You see. So let's read this word for abomination, and it says, "Tawa aiba," or that would be ta'aiba, and it says a disgusting thing. In a ritual sense of unclean food, idols. Idols are, a disgusting thing. All right, there is wickedness, and all right, and those that are following after these idols, all right, they're ultimately going to reap of themselves destruction. So I'm gonna read this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. Zata Hoyam. This is Psalms chapter 28 and verse 4, and it says, "Give them," verse 3. "Draw me not away with the wicked draw me not away with the wicked and with the workers of iniquity, which speak peace to their neighbors, but mischief is in their hearts." Mischief is ultimately in the hearts of those that are into these false ideologies. "Give them according to their deeds and according to the wickedness of their endeavors. Give them after the work of their hands. Render to them their desert." So those that are ultimately following, what's good, will receive of blessings, are pursuant to Psalms, the first chapter, all right, the verses 1 and 2, or really the whole chapter. All right, those that are ultimately following wickedness, they're going to get a righteous recompense. All right, a true just deserts. All right, desert. Salat. I just get the definition in the blue letter. All right, in this word desert, it says gamal or gamawal, and it says an act of good or ill, and it says a benefit, and it says deserving that which he hath given a reward. All right, a recompense, so those, again, those that are working wickedness, they're going to receive what wickedness ultimately gets you, and that's destruction. You see, so I just wanted to go into that. I don't want to zaza banaya Paulo as well. That was a beautiful edification through the spirit. While I don't want to atam yash laila tawablu as well. You have a good night. Wa shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. A shalom, shalom.